our State House studio in Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Leading the news this week, Governor Kay Ivey has made key appointments to the newly formed Alabama Workforce Board and its executive committee. You may remember that during the legislative session, several bills were passed aimed at consolidating and modernizing Alabama's workforce development platform. Part of that was establishing one board full of industry and education leaders to oversee the state's job creation and training initiatives. Ivey appointed Jeff Peoples, President and CEO of Alabama Power, to chair the committee, and Phil Webb, President and CEO of Webb Concrete, to chair the board. Other members of the executive committee are Dr. Kathy Randall, who will serve as vice chair, Dawn Bulgarella, Tom Hand, and Lamar Whitaker. And relatedly, Governor Ivey also made appointments to the Alabama Growth Alliance. This was also part of the Working for Alabama legislative package. This is the group tasked with mapping out new strategies for economic development into the future. Members of this board are Angus Cooper of the Cooper Group, Business Council of Alabama CEO Helena Duncan, Bank Independent CEO Mac Malden, Great Southern Wood CEO Jimmy Rain, Regions Financial Corporation CEO John Turner, entrepreneur Allison Ross, who is the Lieutenant Governor's appointment, Alabama Power CEO Jeff Peoples, who is the Senate Pro Tem's appointment, and former Shell Oil executive Bruce Culpepper, who is the Speaker's appointment. We'll be getting into this more next week. We'll be recording Capitol Journal on location at the Business Council of Alabama's Governmental Affairs Conference in Point Clear. We'll be talking with some of the very people involved in this workforce development issue. So look for that next week. Last month, we shared the news of State Senator Garland Gudger's jet ski accident on the 4th of July that required him to be airlifted to UAB Hospital admitted to the critical care unit. This week, his wife, Heather Gudger, took to Instagram to share an update on the senator's recovery. She offered some details about just how serious the accident was and said he is now home from the hospital to continue his recovery.
Most of you know he was in a Sea-Doo accident on July 4th. He was med-flighted to UAB Hospital and then admitted into ICU. He has 5 fractured ribs, 8 fractured vertebrae. He had a collapsed lung. He had a punctured artery to his spleen that was causing internal bleeding. And then recently we've realized that he did receive a concussion that is causing double vision. Other than that, we are home. We are thankful to be home. There's nothing like sleeping in your own bed at night and having our dogs back with us. Anything that could have gone bad during the situation has actually gone good, and we're blessed for that. If you've called or reached out to us and we have not gotten back with you, I apologize. I turned his phone off the night of the accident. That way I could focus on Garland and focus on our children. But we don't want anyone to think that we don't appreciate all of the phone calls and the emails, the cards you've been sending, the food that you've been sending that's been feeding our family during this time. All of that means the world to us. I believe in prayer and the power of prayer. So if there's anything anyone can continue to do at this time, that is pray for healing.
We certainly wish Senator Gudger a speedy recovery. Look forward to seeing him back in Montgomery soon. A milestone for Mobile-based Airbus and the aviation industry here in Alabama. The jetliner manufacturer celebrated its 500th aircraft built at the Airbus facility there in Mobile. Airbus located in Alabama in 2015 and delivered its first aircraft the following year. Since then, they've experienced multiple expansions and brought on 2,400 employees. The 500th aircraft is an A321A model delivered to Delta Airlines.
We're celebrating the 500th aircraft delivery from the Mobile manufacturing site. Who would have thought we'd be standing here today celebrating 500th aircraft? That's incredible.
We started with one JetBlue airplane in 2016, and the production rate slowly picked up, and we built more FALs, and here we are knocking on 500.
But Mobile to be at 500 as quickly as it has is just a real statement of our success, the commitment of our employees, and our dedication to do a safe, positive, productive work environment every day.
It's a lot of hard work. Like, everybody works really hard. Everybody works as a team. To make 500 airplanes is an insane to me. We all did it together.
To get to 500 deliveries, it took a lot of passion, hard work, and dedication.
Everybody doing their part, holding each other accountable, and coming together as a site, one team, one Airbus.
What I think it took to reach this milestone: dedication, perseverance, and of course, incredible leadership.
Great team, lots of people, a lot of hard work to get to this 500th airplane.
It's a big achievement for this facility, being that we started in 2015, moving the planes every 2 weeks, to now we're almost 10 years, we've hit 500 already.
Being here since almost the beginning and watching us grow as a site, we've accomplished a lot in a short amount of time.
I'm just very proud of the fact that what Airbus has done for this community, the city, really put it on the map as far as aviation is concerned, given the city a lot to be proud of.
I have a son that works here, so I'm seeing it as a local Mobilian. You see the younger generation putting these airplanes together, and you see the pride in their eyes when these things come across the way and we get them in the air the first time. Now we're at 500 across program, and now I'm just thinking, when are we going to hit 1,000?
Now shifting north to Birmingham, where after years of delays, construction on the Northern Beltline roadway project has finally begun. This long-awaited development is expected to invigorate the Birmingham economy and enhance travel options. Capital Journal's Jeff Sanders has the details.
With construction crews making progress in the Alabama sun, the Northern Beltline is finally becoming a reality in Jefferson County.
This is a great day that we're finally getting back on our feet, getting this done and moving forward, because, you know, for so long, it's been slow, stop, slow, stop. We're not going to stop again. We're going to get it done.
The Northern Beltline is the largest uncompleted project of the Appalachian Development Highway System, which began back in the 1960s.
That system is in all 13 states, is 3,090 miles long. It's about 92% finished. There's about 250 miles to go, and that includes the Northern Beltline.
This initial phase of the Northern Beltline is about a 2.5-mile path that should be finished sometime in the year 2026. But it is just the first part of a more than 50-mile project that will take years to complete. Alabama Congressman Gary Palmer played a crucial role in securing the funding to finally get the pavement down.
If our area is going to grow, we're going to have infrastructure. It's almost like the old movie Field of Dreams. If you build it, they'll come. If we do this the right way, this will be one of the most attractive areas in the entire country.
And Palmer believes the Northern Beltline could open a technology corridor from Birmingham to Huntsville that will attract companies from around the world.
It's not just the economics of it, it's the aesthetics of it. And we've got, if you drive around here, you'll see the beauty of this place. We can build this in such a way that we maintain our environmental integrity, that we maintain the beauty of the area, and it's part of what I mean when I talk about our quality of life.
Reporting from Jefferson County, I'm Jeff Sanders for Capital Journal.
With school starting back, there's a renewed interest in making sure students are safe and secure on campus. A new program here in the capital city is helping prepare school resource officers with the latest training. Capital Journal's Randy Scott has that story.
$2 million is coming to the Alabama State University to help present a special course to fight crime in Montgomery. The Bureau of Justice Assistance is partnering with the Prevent School Violence program for the capital city.
Assistance with preventing school violence, stress management, professional development, enhance what MPS already have in place, but to help facilitate more trainings and more assemblies and more workshops for the teachers and the school personnel.
The idea is to keep schools safe from violence occurring outside or inside their walls. This will be done by training school resource officers, law enforcement officers, school staff, and even students on things to look out for should they face any trouble.
It's giving our security officers the skill set to prevent and quickly identify conflict or children about to make bad decisions prior to. So they are the ones that are first come in contact with our students in the morning as we check them in for the school, so they can quickly identify a kid, you know, dealing with a mental crisis or just about to have a bad day, and they can step in and intervene.
We're trying to alleviate some of the pressure from MPS. We want to be proactive instead of reactive. We do not want to wait till something happens for us to react to our school system.
K-12 schools are doing what they can to get their students prepared for the next level, college in some cases. One university is doing what it can to keep those students and the communities they serve safe and protected by offering law enforcement officials active shooter training classes. This also includes restorative practices, which deal with conflict resolution ideas.
And it provides training for teachers, staff, and school resource officers in terms of building relationships with students, building relationship with parents.
Participants say it takes new training for parents, officers, school staff, and students to deal with new problems.
When the last time you had a fire? When was the last time you had a tornado? When was the last time there was a gun threat at your school? Everyone raised their hand and said 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So we're seeing more guns, so therefore we have to train for the possibility of some type of active shooter or some type of incident with a gun.
In Montgomery, Randy Scott, Capital Journal.
This week marked the 50th anniversary of President Richard Nixon announcing his resignation from office following the Watergate scandal. Some may not know that Alabama played an interesting role in that ordeal. While Nixon was still fighting impeachment and trying to build support amongst congressional Republicans, a phone call with then-Governor George Wallace ended up being the tipping point for Nixon realizing his days in office would soon end. Here's an interview Nixon did with his former aide, Frank Gannon.
But then Al Haig came in and he said, you know, we've just had a message from one of Wallace's people saying that George Wallace might be able to influence Congressman Flowers, who's from the state of Alabama, on the Judiciary Committee. And if you'd call him, maybe that would do it, because he has great affection for you and respect and so forth. Well, I decided to call him. So at 3 o'clock, I picked up the phone. Operator got him in Montgomery, Alabama. He said at first it was very difficult for him to hear me. And finally, when the connection came through, he said, well, he hadn't had a chance to really to study this whole matter. He said, I'm praying for you. He says, I'm very much sorry, I'm very sorry that this ordeal had to be brought upon you. But I don't feel that I can really talk to Flowers because he might resent my doing so. If I change my mind, however, I'll let you know. The call had taken only 6.5 minutes. But as I hung up the phone, I knew it was all over. I turned to Al Haig. I said, well, there goes the presidency.
Fascinating. Thank you to my friend David Asbell for sending that clip. Coming up after the break, I'll sit down with new Alabama High School Athletic Association Executive Director Heath Harmon to talk about high school football season and other fall sports. After that, Thomas Raines of the Judge Frank Johnson Institute joins me to talk about the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act and Johnson's unique role in civil rights history. And later in the show, political columnist Steve Flowers is in studio to offer his take on this extraordinary political season. Stay with us.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is Heath Harmon, Executive Director of the Alabama High School Athletic Association. Mr. Harmon, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, and congratulations for assuming the top job at the Alabama High School Athletic Association. Only been on the job for a number of weeks, I understand.
Yeah, I think this is week 5. So
wow,
yeah.
Right in time for fall sports. Well, can you share with our audience a little bit about your background, your career, and what led you to this job?
Yeah, so when we talk about my journey to this job, it really goes back to my high school experience. went to high school at Munford High School in Talladega County. Had great coaches and a great experience in athletics. And from that went to Jack State, and once again had great professors and great coaches and people that really encouraged me to get into coaching. So that's really where it started for me. I started out as a English teacher and a football coach, and with that coached a lot of other sports as well. But leadership has been something that I've always been interested in. So through coaching, kind of learned how to lead and do things like that. And then I got to the point where I wanted to go into administration. And for me, I worked for some really great administrators. I was at Sylacauga City Schools, my first administrative job as an assistant principal, and worked for Todd Freeman, who's an excellent leader. And then ended up at Oxford City Schools as the principal of Oxford High School, worked for Jeff Goodwin, who's now the president of Northwest Shoals. So just had some great leaders and mentors that kind of taught me the art of leadership. And there is an art and science to leadership. And so for me, my background in athletics and then my experience as an administrator, when this job came open, it was just a dream opportunity for me. And I know it's a challenging job, but the opportunity to be in administration involving athletics, because I just think you can't put a value on education-based athletics. I know what it did for me, and I know what it does for other kids, and it gives them an opportunity to compete in a sport they love, but it also gives them an opportunity to take things that they're learning in the classroom, which is very important. That's the whole purpose for being in school. But athletics gives them that laboratory to apply it, and it just gets them experiences that you really can't put a value on. And then from that, they learn things like being a part of something bigger than themselves. They learn how to be a part of a team. They learn how to fiercely compete with someone, but at the end of that contest to shake hands. And I think society can learn from that. I think the opportunity to debate or have discourse in a civil manner is important. And I say all the time, you'll see two competitors on a wrestling mat, and they're simply just trying to defeat the other. And then as soon as that's over, the referee has them in the middle of the mat. They're shaking hands, and a winner's declared, and just showing sportsmanship. So I just think it's the opportunities that we provide our kids. Like I said, you can't put a value on it. And the opportunity for me to lead that and have an impact on that, I'm just very excited about that.
Yeah, how about that? It's interesting when it comes to coaches, teachers, administrators. Y'all all talk about those teachers and coaches and administrators that had an impact on you. I mean, it never fails. And so I think that's just really special that that's where it comes from, right, your experience. Well, it's time for football, right? I mean, some classes have started already. I guess some classes will start in the next few weeks. But we know one thing, football practice is going on right now. I remember those grueling August, I don't know if 2 days are still around, but football practice is going on. So that means the Friday night lights will soon be shining. Talk about that, because what does your organization do to maybe help prepare schools, coaches, players, parents going into a new football season?
Yeah, so I think, really throughout the year, there's professional development opportunities through our Athletic Directors and Coaches Association to push out information and provide opportunities through lunch and learns, for professional development for our coaches. And then we have our summer conference, which was just a couple of weeks ago, where we have mandatory meetings and things like that. And you go back to really, this predates me, I've only been in the office for in my 5th week, but like in January, meetings with the medical advisory board and different things that they suggest, and then that goes through our central board of control that we push out to our schools. So, and right now, obviously Heath is in the conversation. And so for us, if you look at our mission, we want to enhance student learning. We want to enhance sportsmanship, safety, and lifelong values. So within that, safety, is always number one. The safety of our student athletes. So we have information that we push out several times throughout the week, just reminding our coaches and our principals about the awareness of those type issues. So I think to answer your question, professional development opportunities throughout the year, summer conference is also big, our work with our medical advisory board, and then just pushing out information as we get into the start of practice, just so everyone knows that safety is a top priority.
It certainly seems to have a greater emphasis now in recent years than several years ago, certainly decades ago, when I was coming up. An emphasis, like you said, Heat, concussion protocol, things like that. I know here in this building, there was legislation dealing with sudden cardiac arrests and having training and equipment on hand and things like that. Just seems to be a greater emphasis on safety, which maybe that gives parents a greater peace of mind in terms of allowing their students to sign up for football.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think just, as you know to do better, you do better. And throughout the years, if you participated years ago, there may have been things that were, done that were a little differently, but just I think the awareness, and you talk about the sudden cardiac, which was legislation that called for the State Department of Education and the Athletic Association to work together to create a forum for awareness with that. And so very appreciative of the State Department of Education working with us on that. And that's on our Dragonfly, where our athletes can go in and fill that out with their parents, so everybody has the awareness of those things. And then when you talk about concussion protocol, as you learn more about that, and the ways to deal with heat and modifications to make. So I think just really proud of our coaches for making sure that they're doing everything they can to be aware of those protocols and practices, and making sure that they have a really strong plan of how to implement that within the program of what they're doing to get their kids ready to play. And they do things throughout the year for conditioning. I think that there's a greater awareness of those type things that they put into place throughout the year. So because like I said earlier, safety's the top priority.
Absolutely. I'm thinking back. I had some concussions, and I don't think I would have had the same career that I do without some really aware coaches noticing a problem, and I saved my life probably. Well, it's not just helmets and pads, it's also flag football season. I think it's really neat that the emergence of flag football across high schools throughout the state of Alabama. Talk about how that has emerged in popularity.
Yeah, very popular. And me personally, I know from the past 8 years I've served as the principal of Oxford High School. And when we started doing the flag football, it was just really the buzz around campus. And I think in the second year of us having a team, we advanced to the championship game, and our team got to play in Auburn. So that was just a lot of excitement. But just going to those games and watching the competitiveness and the excitement of those participants. So super excited about that, and being able to name a championship in that sport. So like you said, we got a lot of great things going on in the fall with flag football. You've got volleyball, cross country, swimming and diving, and then of course cheer, which is just a lot of opportunities for kids to participate.
Absolutely. What's interesting about flag football is how strategic it is. It's not just the fastest or the strongest or whatever. It's a lot of strategy. I played in college, intramural flag football team, and it just so happened that some old Auburn players had come back. Damian Craig, James Bostic, they were all grad assistants, and they were on our flag football team. They were NFL players. We didn't win a single game because it was all the strategy of the others that had a better strategy, better tactics. So yeah, great flag football. You mentioned those other fall sports. We can't forget those. Swimming and diving, volleyball, cross country, cheer. I'm thinking about the Olympics. And if I was a student right now in high school and watching the Olympics, man, I would be really interested in things like volleyball and track and field and things like that. So do you think that maybe has an impact on students being more eager to get into those kind of sports?
I do. I think anytime that young people have an opportunity to see somebody participating in a sport, I often, think that I can imagine them saying, much like I did when I was younger, hey, that could be me. I could be out there doing that. So I think that's great, because participation in sports is just such a great thing, and it helps with attendance, it helps with grades, it helps with having a sense of belonging in the community that you're in. So, I think that the Olympics provides that opportunity for, just like you said, for young people to see something and think, hey, that might be something that I could do, and give it a try. So I think that is something that you'll see probably will boost some participation.
I know plenty of old football players that became fathers of girls and have become volleyball dads. And that's really been interesting to see. Well, look, we are really thrilled to partner with the Alabama High School Athletic Association, to air the Super 7 football championships and basketball championships every year, football and flag football every year. So we're really eager for that. I guess it'll be in December. So we're looking forward to that here on APT. It's where you can see it. So Heath, again, congratulations on the job. We look forward to staying in touch, and let us know how we can help.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and look forward to building a relationship with you and working together.
Absolutely. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Alabama Public Television is your place for quality educational services. Free professional development for educators and child care providers. Access to free curriculum-aligned videos, lesson plans, and instructional resources with PBS Learning Media. And all the PBS Kids programs parents know and trust. Learn something new every day with Alabama Public Television. Visit us at aptv.org/education to learn more.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. This week marked the 59th anniversary of the enactment of the Voting Rights Act. Joining me next to talk about it is Thomas Raines, Executive Director of the Judge Frank Johnson Institute here in Montgomery. Thomas, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's talk about this. Talk about the Institute, Judge Johnson himself, the background of the Institute, and maybe its mission here in the state.
Sure. So we are a nonpartisan voice based here in Montgomery that works to promote understanding of the U.S. Constitution. We do that through civics education programming, and we work in partnership with the Middle District of Alabama, the federal trial court here in Montgomery, to help the public access the Frank Johnson Courthouse downtown. That courthouse is a National Historic Landmark and a site on the U.S. Civil Rights Trail, given the significance of the events that took place there. Mm-hmm. Judge Johnson was the federal district judge here in Montgomery beginning in 1955. He was nominated by President Eisenhower and took the bench at age 37. And a few weeks after he became a judge, was faced with the case of Browder versus Gale, the case that challenged the constitutionality of city bus segregation.
This is the Rosa Parks era.
And it's interesting. It has come to be known as the Rosa Parks case. Rosa Parks was actually not a plaintiff in that case. The attorneys who filed that case, Fred Gray and others, decided that because Ms. Parks' case was on appeal in state court, they decided for strategic reasons to leave her off of Browder versus Gale, and instead it was several young women who had similar experiences on Montgomery city buses. That case was heard in the spring of 1956, and Judge Johnson, at that point, that kind of case had to be decided by a 3-judge panel. So Judge Johnson and Judge Richard Reeves, who was on the Fifth Circuit, decided that indeed city bus segregation was unconstitutional, and that decision was later upheld by the Supreme Court in November of '56, bringing an end to city bus segregation in Montgomery and then bringing an end to the Montgomery bus boycott. And of course that case kind of helped spark the larger civil rights movement from here in Montgomery.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Judge Frank Johnson is also famous for the 1965 march from Selma to Montgomery that really was a driving force behind the Voting Rights Act. Some pivotal cases decided in that courtroom, right?
That's right. So Judge Johnson, his order in the case of Williams versus Wallace authorized the Selma March to take place. So the way that worked was when the marchers crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, after they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge and were attacked by state troopers on what came to be known as Bloody Sunday, the marchers led by Hosea Williams and John Lewis and Amelia Boynton filed a lawsuit against then Governor George Wallace, demanding their First Amendment rights. This was a group of citizens who wanted to assemble and petition their government for the redress of grievances, in this case, the right to vote. And so they filed Williams versus Wallace, And just in the span of a couple of weeks, very quickly, in March of 1965, that case was heard in front of Judge Frank Johnson. Interestingly, after they filed the case, he began by issuing an injunction against the marchers, saying you were not allowed to march. He wanted everybody to come in to the courtroom so he could hear the facts of the case. That case is a great example of our adversarial system, which is one thing we teach about in our programming, and how our system works, how the system of government works, how the judiciary works. So that case was heard in the spring of 1965, in March, and Judge Johnson's order in that case was very detailed. It laid out specifics of what was going to happen. That the marchers could march from point A to point B, and they could camp there, and then on and so on and so forth. There were guidelines around how many could march at a time. So in parts where the highway was narrow, they could only be single file on the shoulder. At other points, they could be 2 abreast, but not more than 300 marchers. But then, of course, there are other parts where there were not restrictions, and by the end of the march, as we know, there were 25,000 people congregated on Dexter Avenue up in front of the state capitol.
Mm-hmm. And not too many months later, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 became law. So much history there, and a lot of that, what you were talking about, was depicted in the Selma movie.
That's right.
Martin Sheen played Judge
Martin
Johnson.
Sheen, that's right. So if you've seen Selma, there are scenes there where Martin Sheen plays Judge Johnson, President Bartlett.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He's had a few pretty good roles. Oh, that's interesting. And I know y'all do tours of that historic courtroom. And so I'm curious, when folks come in for a tour and you're talking about all this history, there might be things that people are surprised to learn, maybe things that I don't know. What are some of the things that folks take a tour come away saying, you know, I never knew that about Judge Johnson or that era?
You know, it's interesting when we have tours come in and I speak to folks, I will often start by asking who's heard of Judge Johnson, and never more than half of the room has heard of Judge Johnson. Sometimes I'll tell you the 4th graders who come in have been primed for it. They know who he was, but often groups of people who come in have no more than half the group has heard about Judge Johnson. And this is a man in history who really has not been given his due. We'd like to point out how remarkable it was that at one time and one place in history you had Dr. Martin Luther King and Ms. Rosa Parks and Judge Frank Johnson. Because in Ms. Parks you had a citizen who wanted to be treated with dignity, and in Dr. King you had a moral leader and an activist, and in Judge Johnson you had the power of the law and somebody with the courage to uphold the Constitution. When there was plenty of pressure to do otherwise in those days. Mm-hmm. Judge Johnson was pretty ostracized from the community here in Montgomery during the Civil Rights Movement.
I would imagine so.
A cross was burned on his lawn. His mother's home was bombed. Fortunately, she was unharmed. And he faced, had 24/7 protection from U.S. Marshals for years. But because of his courage and his commitment to upholding the rule of law, he had quite an impact on the country. And now the courthouse downtown was named for him in 1992.
Yeah, you talk about courage, and that certainly is what comes across in the Frank Johnson story. Do you think some of that has application for today? I mean, we live in a very divided society, lots of politics going on, but upholding the rule of law, you know, still carries the day in this country. Is that kind of the lesson, you think, one of the lessons from Judge Johnson's career?
It is, and I think that, you know, a lot of people want to be engaged in politics today. They want to be engaged in our system of government, and we want to help them understand how the system works. We discuss the rule of law and the importance of the rule of law. We are a nation of laws. And we spend a fair amount of time talking about that when people come on visits. We're still relatively new. We're getting the word out that we're there. We started in 2019, right before the pandemic. But since we started, we've had about 3,500 people that come through that we have trained or educated or interacted with. That ranges from student groups who are coming to Montgomery on field trips, all the way up to corporate executives and members of Congress who have been to the courthouse to learn about Judge Johnson, learn about what he did, and learn about his impact on the world.
Mm-hmm. And so if folks are interested in the Institute, maybe they want to come see the courthouse and have a tour, where can they go? You have a website, right?
We do. So like I mentioned, we work in partnership with the federal court to help the public access the courthouse. You can visit our website at thejohnsoninstitute.org. There's a form there you can fill out. We are, because it is a working courthouse, we're by appointment only, but we love to have groups come through, and whenever possible, we try to have our visitors, whether they are going through some of our civics education programming or on a tour, we'd like to have them interact with the judges down there who enjoy speaking to different groups.
Mm-hmm.
But we would be thrilled to have anybody come visit.
And maybe if you're lucky, you get Judge Dabena to be a part of some of those tours. I know that was his courtroom for a while too. And I know Eliana Plott is writing a book about Frank Johnson, so I'm really eager for that to come out. We want to have her on to promote that whenever that's a pretty big deal.
Right. So that's my understanding is it's about the relationship between Judge Johnson and Governor Wallace. So they were law school classmates and friendly in law school. They obviously had a falling out later, and I think the book is going to talk about that relationship.
Interesting. Well, we look forward to having Elena on when that comes out. Thomas, thanks for your time. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is political columnist Steve Flowers. Steve, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, it's campaign season, so I got to have the campaign, political guru on to talk about campaign season. This presidential race is really unique. I've not really seen anything like it. You take us back a month ago, it's a completely different race than it is today. What's your take on this? Because we've had a change at the top of the Democratic ticket. Now Kamala Harris has named her, VP running mate. Where do things stand? And I know you wrote a column about this recently.
Well, as you said, it's changed a lot, and I want to thank you again for having me on and tell you how much I appreciate what you do for the state and through your Alabama Daily News and public television. Now, you're the first thing I read every morning.
Thanks.
People ask me what I read. I say read Todd Stacey every morning. But back to your question. Yes, it's changed more, Todd, in the last 6 weeks, the presidential race, than any presidential race I've ever seen in my lifetime of following this stuff. From Biden leaving to Kamala Harris being the nominee, to Waltz being the vice presidential choice, Vance being the Republican vice presidential choice. Lots changed, and it was a foregone conclusion. The polling was showing that if Biden had stayed on the ticket, it was going to be total demise for the Democratic ticket from top to bottom. It was going to destroy any chances of them regaining the House, and it was probably going to make them lose 2 or 3 other Senate seats, pivotal Senate seats that they're probably going to lose 2 or 3 anyway. But and Biden was going to get demolished, and they were going to lose blue states. They were going to lose states like Virginia, Minnesota, and those sort of states. But it was a smooth move for the Democrats, and it's changed the perplexion of the entire race. It's made it a close race. It's going to be razor thin. I think the polls coming out of the Democratic Convention August 22nd will have her in a little bit of a lead. Mm-hmm. But again, it's going to boil down to those 5 or 6 swing states. And I think the national media has been made aware of that now, that it's really not about Alabama and California. It's about Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, and maybe Georgia and North Carolina, although I'm seeing polling that stays pretty firm that those 2 southern states have come back into the fold. for Trump, unless Trump goes over to Atlanta and talks bad about Brian Kemp again.
I mean, that was. I mean,
Kemp can lose.
Scratching their heads.
Trump can lose it. I mean, he lost it last time.
Well, do you think that's an interesting question, because I saw that rally where he's criticizing a very popular governor in Brian Kemp in Georgia, and do you think that the Kamala Harris gambit, what the change that the Democrats made, do you think that's rattled Trump and their campaign a little bit, because they seem a little off message?
I think they are, but I think it's caused by the momentum that she's picked up in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I think they're having reevaluated, although I think long term that they knew this was going to happen. And I think that's one of the reasons why they picked Vance, because the bottom line is, as I said earlier, it's going to boil down to, I believe, those 3 Rust Belt states.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan that are going to be 50-50, and I think Vance was picked for that reason.
Because he's an Ohio guy, but kind of Rust Belt.
He's neighboring Ohio, and that solidifies Ohio. It's now become a Republican state, but it solidifies Ohio. But it also they're after Michigan, is what they're all after. I think it really gets down to Michigan and Wisconsin. I really believe Pennsylvania is going to go Democratic. I think that's one of the reasons why Kamala Harris did not pick Shapiro, who was the obvious choice.
That's what I thought.
To carry Pennsylvania. But I think that her polling showed the turnout was going to be good enough in Philadelphia to carry. I've always thought Pennsylvania was going to go Democratic, even when Biden was on the ticket. But having said that, the Shapiro lack of picking him in that vice presidential thing, which probably would have guaranteed the state of Pennsylvania, because he's a very popular governor there.
Right.
And it would have guaranteed them, but it shows the division on the Israel-Palestine issue in the Democratic Party, and it's going to cause some problems down the road closer to election for the Democrats.
Yeah, and I think Governor Shapiro probably has ambitions of his own, but I was intrigued by that. So there's definitely been a bounce for Kamala Harris. The enthusiasm is back, right? It's not necessarily that it's the Democrats coming back home, right? They were kind of unenthusiastic about Biden. They have an energetic candidate now who can actually go out and campaign, so they're coming back home. But this still comes down to kind of independent swing voters, right? And so I'm getting to the question of issues versus vibes. I think the Democrats right now are winning on the vibes, right? The enthusiasm, hey, we've got an energetic campaign and all that. Is the campaign ever going to get back to issues like the economy, like immigration, things like, and foreign policy, like you said, Israel and Gaza? And if it does, is that a stronger hand for the Republicans to play issues rather than just enthusiasm?
I think what we have happened in the country, and it's changed in my lifetime, beginning back with the '60 presidential race with Nixon and Kennedy. That was a real 40-state election, Todd, where you had there were 40 states in play. I mean, the Midwestern states, Nebraska and Kansas, have always been Republican, but having said that, I don't think there are that many independent voters in this country anymore. They're certainly not in Alabama. I think you're in one tribe or the other. I believe this country is divided almost exactly evenly, about 45-45. So that leaves about 10% of the people that really are important in the presidential election. And it isn't the swing voters in California or Alabama either. It's the swing voters in those 6 states.
We know where our electoral votes are going.
Exactly. They're going to color us in the middle of the country. Not all going to be red the night of the election, before the election closes. But having said that, it's all going to be about turnout. And I think her choice of Waltz from Minnesota dictated that too. You've got to get your base enthused. The Republican base is enthused. They want Trump back. The Republican, hardcore Republican 45% is they're going to show up. It's a matter that, but where she has been a very vital cog in helping the Democrats get back in the game, is she is the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. You've got, our political parties in this country are really different. I mean, when George Wallace ran for president in 1968, he'd go around the country saying there's not a dime's worth of difference in 2 parties. They're about the same. they're different now on social issues, on everything, foreign policy, everything. They're diverse, so you don't have a real choice for that middle ground voter in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin to decide, because you've got most people. It's just getting your people out. Now she gets the base out, which is Democratic or African American women. She identifies, so that's why the momentum is there. It's just a matter of whether on election day, November 5th, there could be some nuances that could change this election.
A long way to go, 90
Yeah.
days. One of the differences I think in the parties, as it has just been demonstrated, is that the Democrats changed their candidate. They have more control over their primary nominating process, as we have just witnessed. I mean, they essentially forced the United States president out of the race. Thinking back to Wallace, 1976, with that Florida primary, the Democratic Party made sure that Wallace wasn't going to be the nominee, made sure Carter was going to be the nominee. So Democrats have traditionally been more in control of their nominating process, which is a thing. But let's bring it back home to Alabama, because we do have a competitive race here in Alabama's 2nd District. I've interviewed both Shamari Figures and Caroline Dobson multiple times. They're spirited. They're out there campaigning. This is as purple a district as we're going to have. Do you think that change at the top of the ticket has impacted down ballot and will give Figures more of an advantage than maybe he would have with Biden?
Yes, it did. It helps Figures in that race. The only chance a Republican had, or the best chance a Republican had to win that race, was for Biden to stay on the ticket, because it would left the Democratic base unenthused. They weren't going to vote for Trump, but African American voters were not going to turn out to vote. And this district was drawn for an African American Democrat to win. As you know, the map that was attached to the note that was attached to the map says in 15 out of 16 elections, a Democrat would have won in general elections, this race. It's designed for an African American Democrat to win this seat. But I have never seen a better candidate. I've not met Mr. Figures as much as I have Caroline Dobson, but that young lady has got a lot of going for her. She'd be a great congressperson in a normal race. And I'm not saying she's not going to win. I'm just saying that change does hurt, because it brings out an African American turnout, which is what's needed for the 2nd District to win. And I think especially in Mobile. So
it was probably going to take an anomaly, like Biden being at the top of the ticket, like historically low turnout from the Democrats. Well, one thing that's interesting, I've thought really ever since the creation of the district, really before people even started signing up to run, was that it's going to remain purple. It's going to remain competitive, right? And in that way, whoever wins, maybe they just can't play to their own base. Maybe they have to listen a little bit more to the middle and to the other side. Do you think that might be a positive development no matter who wins?
I don't. I think that whoever wins will be in the Republican or Democratic corner in Washington.
Yeah, that's just the way it is.
That's the way it is. You know that. You worked up there. You worked for Congressman Roby, and you know that when you get there, you're one or the other. I mean, you don't deviate from that party line.
You put your team jersey on.
You put your team jersey on, it's just going to be the people who are Republicans in that district are going to be without a congressperson, basically, as far as their philosophy and their vote. Or if Caroline wins, the Democrats are going to be without a voice. They're going to be on one team or the other. Figures probably will definitely be, because that's where he came from. He came from the Obama administration, the Democratic hierarchy, and he'll vote the Democratic line. And the one thing I like about what Caroline Dobson's done, she's run an old-fashioned retail campaign. She's been to all the rural counties. She's been to Pike. She's been to Butler. She's been in Phoenix City. I mean, she's worked Monroe County, her home county. I don't know that Figures has done that. I think Figures has hit the high spots and raised a lot of Washington money, and depend on the Democratic turnout to win. So I just like the way she's run her campaign. And Todd, who's to say that district ain't going to be changed again?
Well, that's true. Litigation continues, and it may be completely different depending on federal courts. But this time around, I think you're right. I think Figures has the advantage. It would take something special for the Republicans. Well, look, let's switch gears real quick and have a way too early conversation about who might run for governor in 2026. We're a couple of years out, but look, these things start developing, as you know, they're probably already developing. So I think some names are probably obvious, but what's your thoughts about who might run for governor and who has the advantage going into 2026?
Well, you bring that up because everybody's already bringing it up. Every civic club I visit with, first question, who's running for governor? It goes back, Alabamians love the governor's race. Well, and it's been a more important race. You know, back as late as 20 years ago, there were more votes cast, or 30 years ago, in a Democratic primary for governor in a Democrat than in the presidential race.
Really?
Alabamians just weren't interested in the presidential race. That's changed and it's conversed now, but having said that, yeah, there's obvious people who are going to run or have to go somewhere, but the one wild card in that race, Todd, and before it happens is we also have a U.S. Senate race up for re-election that year.
That's right.
Everything's on the ballot. It's going to be a gigantic year. I mean, you and I are going to have a field day beginning in January, if not before, because all the constitutional offices are up, all the 140 legislative seats are up, and we got a U.S. Senate race, and this congressional race will come back again.
Right.
They ain't going to quit. So having said that, it's going to be a gigantic year, but the governor's race has got three people who may have got to make a choice. Rick Pate can't run for agriculture commissioner again. He's got to go somewhere. Steve Marshall can't run for attorney general again after 8 years. He's got to go somewhere. The obvious one running, has been running since the day he was elected to the legislature, was Will Ainsworth. He runs every day. No question. He'll tell you right now he's running. So he looks like the early favorite. Ainsworth does, but and he's dedicated to it. I mean, he's dedicated to running. But you got other people. Young Boozer's probably going to stay where he is. He can stay again, which is going to make the lieutenant governor's race an interesting race too.
Yeah, a lot of senators maybe want a promotion, something like that. Well, let me ask you about like maybe an outsider type candidate, Lindy Blanchard. I wrote about this same kind of names I mentioned, but I also mentioned Lindy Blanchard because she ran for governor. Or I guess she started out running for Senate, but she ran for governor, spent millions of dollars, 15 million, something like that. Didn't really get anywhere, but she clearly has a lot of the resources and wants to be out there. Do you think she might be a factor in that race?
I think she is for this reason. I spoke to the Capital City Republican women last week, a week before last, and mentioned what you and I just said, the three people who got to go somewhere that may be in the governor's race, Pate, Ainsworth, and Marshall, and she was in the audience. She was part of the group, and she said, came to me about Steve, I'm probably running for governor myself.
Well, there you go.
I said, well, Lindy, I should have mentioned you. I apologize because you've run before. You've got some name ID, and you got some money, obviously. So she's going to probably be in the governor's race. But I've always said this, Todd. This election coming up in 2026 for governor, it is ripe for a Fob James type of candidate.
A populist type?
Well, not just the populist thing, but a wealthy businessman who's got nothing to do but run for governor. I mean, Fob James sat over there in Opelika, built diversified products, made barbells, made $1 jillion by selling it to Sears or somebody. And he decided, well, I'm 40-something years old, I've made $1 jillion, I've got plenty of money, I think I'll run for governor. I'll buy a governor's office rather than play golf. There's a businessman, and there are more people like that now than were in '78. I think you may not know, there may be a businessman who sold his business, or a businesswoman, like Lindy Blanchard. She's got her own money. There's more people out there. This right for a new beginning is what Fob said in '78. A rich business person who decides, I want to buy the governor's office rather than play golf.
Well, we will be paying attention to that. It's like I said, it's early, but maybe not too early because these things start happening pretty quickly.
The point I was going to make when I got off my track, Tuberville is the real key of this race.
Yeah.
See, the Senate race is up that year too. There's all kind of speculations to what Tuberville will do if Trump wins.
Cabinet post or some kind of administration post, and that opens up a vacancy, which has a cascading effect. Yeah, I've written about that too. We'll have to wait and see what happens to the presidential race, but that would certainly impact everything else.
Tuberville's got well, and if he leaves that Senate seat and decides to run for governor himself, he could run for governor. And so that what I'm saying that would be open. You got an open Senate seat possibility too, which will draw some of those people out of the governor's race.
Yeah, last time we had an open Senate seat, it was quite the affair, for lack of a better way to say that. Steve, we're out of time, but thanks again for coming on. Look forward to having you back because I want you to talk about your book about Jabbo Waggoner. We'll have you on next month to talk about that. But thanks again for coming on the show.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
The Alabama Department of Archives and History was founded in 1901, becoming the nation's first publicly funded independent state archives agency. The archives identifies, preserves, and makes accessible records and artifacts of enduring historical value to the state. Thomas Owen founded the agency and served as its first director. He was succeeded by his wife, Marie Bankhead Owen, who headed the archives for 35 years and was the second woman to lead a state agency.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.